too. And we are recording with Wuhan Webb, the man who
live.
is
We're live, Tommy. No,
live. I guess not really, but we kind of, I might make an exception and start doing live episodes with you. I never do live episodes, but I might start doing that. But so for all future listeners, today is Saturday, March 12th, 2022. George Webb's Twitter is growing in leaps and bounds. You were on the Stu Peters show yesterday. You are breaking news on all sorts of bioweapons and sea spray activities. And actually, I'm listening to the Devil's Chessboard right now.
About great book, David Talbot, great book.
And I'm in it right now, and they're actually, ironically enough, talking about some of the Dr. Mengele inspired sea spray activities of Fort Detrick in Korea, which I never knew about. But George, for all the new listeners, please introduce yourself.
Hey, I'm George Webb, and you're listening to George Webb and Tommy Carrigan on the Tommy Carrigan podcast. It's called Tommy's Podcast on Rumble. And I was doing TSA announcements for the transportation safety. So that's why I have my radio voice. And I just thought it was funny. The script I was given, put the mask of your child on before your own. Do not become alarmed if a small aerosol spray is put into your child's face. Just these little things are subtle, but after a while you start getting a little bit paranoid.
Yeah, you just gotta do not be alarmed. Please show your Ukrainian flag before boarding the flight. If you are not for Ukraine, if you don't, what is it? What is the thing they always say? Slava Ukraine. Is that the saying?
You're for Putin. You're a disinfo agent.
Yeah. And please show us your phone to make sure that you have no screen grabs or memes about how there are U.S. funded biolabs in Ukraine that line up with the attack sites of Russia. And so with that, though, we talked about it last week, how the narratives are now falling apart and the time it takes to watch a movie. I'd say it's accelerating. Now with last week, 2 weeks ago, we talked about Snake Island and Kyiv. And a week later, we talked about how they were fake. Now, in the time we've done a podcast, a narrative arose, was propped up, had holes poked through it, and collapsed. There are no biolabs. Conspiracy. There might be some defensive biolabs. They are not ours. They are ours. The Russians might fall. They might fall into Russian hands. The Russians want to bring it to the UN Security Council. How is this developing more and more? And are there coronavirus bats being shipped out of Kyiv or Ukraine or wherever?
Not me, Tommy, saying this. The not the State Department, but the foreign minister goes to the Security Council. That's where not everybody gets to sit in the general. Everybody gets to sit in the General Assembly. Security Council is only like 20 seats, right? So he goes there and says this bat truck story, like a bat out of hell, like a bat truck out of hell. You're probably too young to remember a guy named Meatloaf, but there's a song. You've heard the expression, right?
Yeah.
Like a bat truck, like a bat on hell. Literally transporting 140 boxes of these things that are flea ridden. It's not actually the bats that are transferring the disease. It's the fleas and ticks. They're called ectoparasites. So you just wonder, and I've been told now that the Russians didn't have the biolabs in mind when they launched the attack, and because they didn't come out before the attack and say so.
Yeah, that would be the. I was gonna say side note. Sorry, I know I'm interrupting you. I get excited.
No. I was just wondering. All the military people you've interviewed, right? They've all said that they clearly announce and make a public announcement of what their objectives are before they launch the attack. So the maximum number of their people will be killed. Yeah. Right? No, I don't think so. I think D-Day was kind of a secret operation.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. People are like, how come they didn't announce it? What is the quote from Sun Tzu? Not all of his other ones. What is the quote? All war is based on deception.
There you go.
All of it.
I agree.
All of it. Obama didn't come out and say, we are hitting the bin Laden compound in Abbottabad tonight at 4 a.m. No, it's afterwards that we go in and
how can we be sure that Obama really was going after Osama bin Laden at all? I mean, even though they
so beforehand.
Yeah, even though they said afterward that's what their objective was,
How
the
do we
Russian
not know that they were just going into a Abbottabad to go fuck with?
golf.
Because isn't that where the Pakistani ISI is located? I mean, maybe it was just dumb luck that Obama stumbled upon Bin Laden, and now they're trying to cover their tracks.
There's cricket fields there. I mean, how do they know the SEALs didn't want to play cricket?
Jeez.
But this is a serious talk that's happening right now. It's like the Russians weren't looking for the biolabs. They just didn't have anything to do yesterday when they went to the Security Council and convened a security.
It was just, it's I'll last thing and then I'll stop interrupting you but it makes me think, right? But again, Unit 731, the parallels are it was the fleas that would infect the rats. It wasn't the rats. It was the fleas that used rats as, you want to talk about some horror movie shit. Instead of using like agar, like microbiology, the rats were the agar. The rats were the substrate. And they tie them down with little metal clamps on their hands and feet, and they put the fleas in there that had Ebola, Marburg, Black Plague, smallpox. But sorry, George.
They're trying to disguise this. This is as old as biowarfare. You go back to when the original attacking the war horses in World War I. It was the fleas and ticks, right? Going all the way back. Mosquitoes became another vector. Hanscom Air Force Base in Massachusetts is the key base that worked on bomblets for Korea that you're talking about, all working with the 731 guys. The 731 top guys all became executives in a company called Green Cross International. And they all got plasma centers, not over just in China, but in the United States, folks. All the Green Cross guys, war criminals, got plasma centers in the United States. It's a comforting thought, Tommy.
It is. Yeah. It's Operation Paperclip's bad enough. But you go into bringing back the Unit 731 guys who were actually, and that's not to say that, it makes light of it because, the Nazis were only testing on Jews. But Unit 731, you really want to add insult to injury. They were testing on American POWs.
Yeah, it's horrible. The 731, the only reason I make light of it because it's so horrible. And
you have to. It's gallows.
Yeah, it's so bad. But, people are also saying we produce documents, right? In the Russian document yesterday, translation. I could only find the French version because the English version was whacked, but actually somebody translated this for me. That's awfully nice. But here's their statement, Tommy. I didn't make this statement.
By the Chief of Nuclear, Biological, and Chemical Protection Troops of the Russian Federation Armed Forces, Lieutenant General Igor Kirillov, March 7th, 2022, about biological programs.
Yeah, so this has been mentioned by Kona, the head of the guy there, Schwarzkopf, every day in every press briefing they do. They've said that they were going to come out with a detailed briefing. They're preparing these briefing notes. I got to believe this isn't just because they didn't have anything better to do that day. That's probably because they had good reason. We're also being told we have these papers from this gal named Dilyana, who is a person who followed these bioweapons in these labs of especially Ukraine, where there was 11 at the time in 2017. The other one was Georgia, and the other one was Kazakhstan. And this is where these, what they call reference libraries were, where there was all these extremely deadly pathogens, right? These papers came out about the US State Department running these programs under diplomatic immunity in 2018. In the papers, names of operations like Operation Big Bite, like mosquitoes and fleas, right? Operation Big Itch, like mosquitoes and fleas. Okay, those aren't defensive operations. Those are not defensive operations. It's sort of like Operation Overlord. This is a big attack, like D-Day. So I don't know as if, Wuhan military games now, speculation, but could have been a practice run, a live exercise for what's about ready to happen here in Ukraine. It's not beyond the realm of possibility. Where you go, again, we have them taking bats. We have Ukraine, 140 cases of infected bats, within flea-ridden infected bats leaving. I'll get that part here in a second, but leaving Kharkov, going outside of Ukraine. And then we have other papers where the US Air Force program that's blood harvesting, this is right out of Green Cross again, blood harvesting and they don't want Ukrainian blood. Now, if you're blood harvesting and you don't want Ukrainian blood, doesn't it make sense that it would be outside of Ukraine? And the Air Force papers say that they want Russian blood, Caucasian Russian blood. You can't make this stuff up, Tommy. But again, if the Russians weren't thinking about it, why did they put it in their statement? Why did they put it in their statement?
Well,
you can't believe it, but it's there.
no, but you have to examine it. You kind of have to, isn't it that like Buddhist? I think it's some Buddhist quote, but it's basically, the path to enlightenment is sober examination of what is in front of you and not labeling it good or bad, just examining it for what it is and moving from there. So let's think about military games. Yeah. Was there something much bigger planned, and did somehow or another KGB intelligence, which is notoriously incredible, that they just, because they've never had the technological advantage of the United States. They had people in the Manhattan Project, the first special access program. Did they somehow see? Did they find out through, and this is all speculation, that there was something to happen? Who knows? Let's just say May 2022, and that's what this is. Is they're preemptively going in and foiling it? That's just one.
Well, I definitely had IP addresses going back to two henchmen named Fruman and Parnas from the U.S. Congress, a back channel to the U.S. Congress. This is the same place they get the 35 billion ATM machine for every time they turn around. 5 billion from USAID, 6 billion. Kolomoisky is the guy who gets it through Privat Bank. The IMF is also giving them money, $15 billion at a tranche. It seems to be going into a Kolomoisky oil refinery named Sokar in Turkey, and then that's what ends up in your gas pump in Ukraine. You can't believe this. But, Tommy, I think the thing you said, sober examination. Anyway, we tracked this guy named Felix Sater, and he went to Almaty, where the other central reference library, the CRL, which is basically the whole biopreparat Ken Allebeck refrigerator. You've interviewed Ken Allebeck several times. This is the refrigerator of extremely dangerous pathogens. It's called, euphemistically, the central reference library.
but you did tweet the other day, right? I think you said you were like, in Obama's defense, they did try to. Am I remembering this correctly? They did try to securely. So yeah.
Oh, I'm defending Obama here, and I'm saying that the president doesn't have power in these situations a lot of times.
He doesn't know what's going on most of the time.
Yeah, and everybody's pointing to the fact that he was involved in the 2005 agreement to move the bioweapons there with Richard Lugar, to move the reference library there with extremely dangerous pathogens. The lab got built in 2010. That was under when Obama was president. So he started as a senator and then as president. But what I'm saying is Obama was the guy who knocked down gain of function. This is why I think that they had to move it when he knocked down gain of function. They had to go to China with this thing. This is why we see the IP traffic of the Ukrainians going to China. We have a wacky, weird, and flea and tick thing break out in Wuhan. And there's this gal from NATO named Virginia Benassi again that shows up there to be the first person on the scene. We still haven't got a picture of her. She supposedly works out of the WHO. So I'm just saying that the timing of all this seems very suspicious. It seems to be very bang, bang, and Obama knocks down the gain of function testing, and then we immediately seem to outsource this to Ukraine. I'm not saying that I have the paperwork for that, but there's a lot of circumstantial evidence in the mosaic right now.
So as to sort of, and as everyone that watches this podcast knows, I do not shy away from wild speculation at all. I believe for a couple weekends in a row, we accused Leonardo DiCaprio of synthesizing COVID-19. So clearly George and I are not concerned with the fringes, but because there are so many things coming out right now that you do have the documents on, that you are following the paper trail, can we get into a little more of those, and then we'll move on to speculation? But I mean, we have so much meat and potatoes right now. We don't need to speculate about what's for dessert. It's so what is all going on right now? What are because you're proving I mean, Alex Jones is always right. I mean, it's now becoming George Webb is always right. You're proving these things right. So where are we right now? Because every week I have you on, a week later, it seems like you have a crystal ball. So let's just get to it. What is going on right now? What is the big enchilada? What is there undeniable evidence of onwards and so forth? That's not a thing.
Can I just speak to DiCaprio for a second? Of course, we were joking, and he played Howard Hughes, and Howard Hughes had literally every aviation secret stolen from him by a guy named Bob Mayhew, and it started half the companies in Southern California. Huge Air Crash, or Hughes Aircraft used to be my customer, had everything stolen from it. Lockheed. I'm talking satellites. I'm talking about missiles, rockets. You name it. Teledyne and not Teledyne, but Rocketdyne, and then also Rockwell, and all these other companies that get spun off by Mayhew. But we'll put that aside because, like you say, that's fun, rumor, speculation. I'm going to read.
He did play Howard Hughes, Spruce Goose. I mean, is he Kolomoisky and Antonov 225? I mean, we don't know.
I think what you got to remember, they almost killed him twice.
Yeah.
Okay. Once during the war, because remember, they're saying he's the Mark Zuckerberg of his age, right? They're saying here's this whiz kid who's really an oil kid, and he inherited the oil. You know, the drilling bit. So they didn't want to go in front of Congress with, hey, we're a bunch of Nazis that are trying to figure out what we're going to do after the war. And we really would like to start a whole bunch of projects like the U-2, and we need a job. You know, they used Hughes, and I can't remember the name of the plane, in the prototype of the U-2, and then they almost killed him in the U-2. Yeah. Wouldn't that have been convenient? So anyway, I don't want to get into that, but getting back to what you said, Tommy, give me facts. This is reading directly from the testimony of the Russian general. Okay. And I'm going to just say, for example, since 2021, the Pentagon has been carrying out a project called Diagnosis, observing the prevention of, the prevention of zoonotic diseases in the armed forces of the Ukraine, which is funded by $11.8 million. That's charge number one, that they're using the army of Ukraine, all these conscriptees, for virus vaccine testing. Biological testing. Now, I don't know if you call that bioweapons or not, but it's certainly biological testing, and it's called Diagnosis. Okay. I'll throw that first one on the table. I've said that they were testing against US personnel and NATO personnel because US is a part of NATO when we go do these joint projects. I can't remember what state sends its National Guard. I think it's Wisconsin or Minnesota. And I think California also sends National Guard. There's several different National Guards that go there. So they could be part of this testing. So that's first off is Diagnosis. You know, you can just go down the list and read this thing. In 2021, the German defense minister examined the Congo-Crimea hemorrhagic fever, leptospirosis, meningitis, and hantavirus causative agents within the Ukraine-German Initiative for Biological Security and in the borders of the European Union. So this means that they're in conjunction with Germany, they've decided to make this your EU-wide testing program. And who voted on that? So, and there's a list of these things, and we can go, you know, down the list as we go through the podcast. But I think we should just take these one at a time and just say, are we really uncovering something here that's more than just a blip? This is more than just weapons of mass destruction for Saddam Hussein. This may be the whole State Department proxy program for bioagents.
Yeah, it would be like if like a Nazi surveillance plane or something saw one or two ships approaching Normandy. Is it just that, or as the fog recedes, do you see like, oh, this is a pivotal moment in world history? This is actually the largest amphibious invasion of mankind.
I love your knowledge of history because you paint these visual scenes. You know, if you've ever watched the movie The Longest Day,
Oh yeah.
that's exactly what happens as the ships come out. He goes, "Invasion, invasion."
Yeah, you see one, and then all of a sudden it's like you just see the entire thing, and it's like, oh my god.
Oh, that's great, Tommy. I love the color here. This is great. So I'll read one more. Under the pretext of testing these agents, the treatment and prevention of coronavirus infection. So they're doing coronavirus bat testing there. Bioagents. Now, I don't know if it's a bioweapon or not, but they're testing bats and coronaviruses there in Odessa, this facility. The Odessa facility seems to be the thing with the central reference library, the Ken Alabek refrigerator. That seems to be the thing that triggered the Russians because that's the one they talk about. And then there's one in Kiev also that triggered them, and they haven't taken it yet, I don't believe. I think that's the next thing to go. And speaking of predictions, my prediction is this: Zelensky, you remain the president. We leave on a 30-day schedule in a controlled withdrawal if you turn over the stuff at that lab. Let the world see this, because the Russians have been double crossed on this before. They got blamed in Syria in 2014 for Ghouta and Aleppo. And they turned it around and said, no, it's the Russians that did it, when it was actually, in fact, terrorist stuff that got loose from Saddam Hussein, then went to Libya, then went to Syria. So it's this kind of like, whack-a-mole. So the Russians got blamed for this before in 2014. And the same characters that blame the Russians, like Amal Clooney, George Clooney's wife, are now being brought out again as Time Women of the Year all of a sudden, because she's going to blame Russia again for a bioweapons attack here. So that's my prediction: is turn over the lab and we leave. Turn over the lab documents and we leave with protection for Donbass.
And you couldn't preemptively say 2 weeks ago, this is what we're doing, because they would have scattered, they would have destroyed it, they would have XYZ. Oh, crazy conspiracy theorists. You almost have to take them off guard and go, seemingly for no reason, go take Kyiv or something. It seems like a brilliant smokescreen.
Yeah, I mean, you got to catch people in the act. Now, what the Russian minister said in this speech at the Security Council yesterday was, we didn't get this stuff. We didn't get the bioagents. We didn't get the vials, if you will. But what we did get is the documentation. We got the papers, and they're publishing these papers. And so some people are saying half glass, half full, half empty. You don't have any vials. So you made it all up, Russian propaganda. Other people are saying, well, the documentation would be the last thing you would say. The first thing you would do is obey Victoria Nuland's order to get all the pathogens out of there, either to destroy them or fly them out of there. I mean, this is easy to just put them up in a helicopter and throw them in the Black Sea. Yeah. So the Russians seem to think they moved them to another location, like a Moldova or, one of the other, Poland would be my first thing. I mean, that's basically where the Nazis kept all the Albert Speer documents. Leave Lviv. That kind of, there's a song there.
Leave Lviv. It sounds like a great album.
I'm leaving from Lviv. Yeah. Don't know when I'll be back again.
Leaving on a jet plane.
You got
bioagents in the back of it.
But you go just to the north, Tommy. You're in the Owl Mountains. You're in Albert Speer, where they put all the original bioweapons documents after World War II. So that's where I'd put them. I wouldn't throw them away. I wouldn't throw the vials away if I was a good Nazi. But remember, this is a Nazi conclave over there in the West. They sided, that side of the Dnieper River on the West, sided with the Nazis. Stephen Bandera, then Lebed. They still have blood and soil marches, the torchlit marches like Charlottesville. Very Nazi still. Odessa, there's been books and books and books written about how that's where the Nazis went to get to a warm water port, after World War II. So, and you're an expert in this World War II history, so I should let you comment on that.
Well, I was just thinking, no, in general, I mean, they do kind of echo all the same stuff. Albert Speer, the huge the huge drapes, the Nuremberg, the lights shooting up into the sky. It was all about the super sensory experience where you're supposed to oversaturate the mind. They're doing all that. It's not neo-Nazi in the sense that someone's a Republican and you don't like it. I mean, genuine neo-Nazis echoing in the footsteps every way that they can. Like,
and the Nazis loved the bioweapon because it was a force multiplier like nobody's business. One guy with one guy on one boat with one fan and one test tube could kill thousands, and ethnically cleanse Donbass,
Yeah.
So Operation Sea Spray. So again, speculation, but just saying, Nazis invested in that. So Congo Crimea hemorrhagic fever. There's a program called, we have the documentation, it's been out since 2018, called UP8, which is Ukraine Program 8. Now, again, big bite, big itch. There's many operation names that were in these documents. But when you hear Ukraine Program 8, you think, hey, there's probably Ukraine Program 1, 2, 3. And now with these new documents, now we have proof that there is documents. UP8 seems to be Crimea Congo hemorrhagic fever. If you go back to Crimea Congo hemorrhagic fever, where it got the word Crimea was an outbreak after World War II in Crimea. Where it got the word Congo was an outbreak about 20 years later in Africa. As a lot of these Odessa guys started saying, hey, we got to start testing on some populations here. Where's a news vacuum where we can do that on a population? Well, we may as well do it in Congo, where there's almost 90% grade enriched uranium. And so, the guy who did the whole exodus of I'm trying to remember his name, Borman sent his son to Congo, to the uranium fields of Congo. And then guess what? When there's a worker uprising, Crimea hemorrhagic fever now becomes Congo Crimea hemorrhagic fever. So that's why I track UP8, but it turns out there's UP13 now. There's a whole bunch of other Ukraine programs. There's similar programs in Kazakhstan, KZ1, KZ2, KZ3, who knows how many there are. But we're seeing a lot more supporting documentation come in now to support this Juliana's documentation from 2018.
I'm trying to think of, I mean, the Nazi fantasy was always a disease that attacked a certain race. If you could find a genetic marker or something that could just take out, that you wouldn't even need to do, forget laser guided bombs. I mean, a disease that could only affect whoever you didn't like, Jews, blacks, or you could choose a nationality. You could go and try to find a distinct genetic marker in there.
You got it, Tommy. in the Air Force document that we have, it's looking for markers for Caucasians and Russians, Slavic versus the more Nordic, my gene line, which is more German and so forth. You just can't believe it. That's what the Air Force documents ask for. We will not take Ukrainian blood samples because you could be mixing in some of our old Bandera, Peter Daszak's dad and the whole Galicia brigade, and we don't want that mixed in. We want to make sure we're getting Slavs, right? Now, one of the early things that this genetic thing focused on was blood type, because people in Asia, mainly O, and the spikes that are actually, like you have the spike protein on a coronavirus, you have spikes sort of like that on your red blood cells. And it all came about because of the bubonic plagues. The A spikes wiped out half of Europe. If you had the spikes, you fought against the plague. Then the second wave, you got the B spikes, and that's why Europeans have A's and B's. We're blood type A and blood type B. And some of us American Indian blood types are O's. I think I'm actually B, but I don't know. You know what blood type you are?
I don't know. I know that despite being translucent white, I think my dad's grandma was actually like 100% like Cherokee Indian.
Yep.
Just
not like mine.
Yeah.
My great grandmother. Yeah.
When you look at all the lakes in New Hampshire, it's Moose Lake, McGunt Lake, it's Bagog. They're all named after just Native American shit. Yeah. So I think whatever that would be, I would imagine O, right?
Well, the spikes or the agglutination, there's I think 8 genes and 3 different types, but and you can play with the 8 genes, but usually the A's and B's hang around. They're tougher than the O's.
Yeah.
But coronavirus turned out, as we know, to be twice as effective against A as B, and then half as effective against O, which is pretty significant. This is the first time we ever tested against blood type. Now, that's not racial. That's not racial, but there are other things on your organs that are receptors on your organs that are used in organ matching, the HLA matching, that also can be used for targeting. And that gets a much more sophisticated, but again, if you know the code, you can target certain people's organs and then not others. But then you need a whole bunch of genomes first, so you know how to differentiate. So I'm not saying that's where it's going, but man, we are seeing documents that are pointing in that direction.
Side note, are Native Americans, do they have a higher percentage of O blood type?
Yes.
I was just thinking like, oh.
Tommy, that's why you're here.
And that's why I'm banned from YouTube. But like, but I was thinking like, but right, because you do have this, right? There's Rh negative and Rh positive, and then you do have all the sites on organs. That's how you have organ rejection, right? You have to have immunosuppressant drugs. That's why not, that's why you have to have an organ match, as opposed to just, you can't just get it. And it does seem absurd, but I mean, it's the great Arthur C. Clarke quote: any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic. So yes, I mean, you go back to Napoleon's age and you drop a laser guided JDAM from a plane that's beyond the line of human sight, and all of a sudden something just explodes nearby, but there's no artillery for 1,000 miles. That's magic. Or even better yet, you use some like active denial energy weapon or acoustic thing. You bring that back to the Revolutionary War. That's magic. So it does seem like magic. How can you just attack certain? But as we're seeing, like as technology marches forward, that is possible. You can do this.
Absolutely. Immunosuppressive drugs have to do that.
Yeah.
Cancer targeting drugs have to do that. Any kind of personalized or precision medicine has to do that. And what it is, just to get it on the record for your listeners and my listeners, is it's called the MHC complex, major histocompatibility complex. And there's combinations of them. And your body is brilliant in terms of how it uses the combinations of different parts, like Lego blocks, to make different MHCs. So I won't go into the technical details of it, but there is a method to this madness, and it's used every day in immunosuppressive therapy and cancer therapy. So having said that, now looking at other things that these labs are doing and the outbreaks that are happening in Ukraine of all these livestock type things. Remember, if I want to target, let's say, people in Wuhan, I can drive the Batmobile. The Kolomoisky can get in his Batmobile, take the 140 containers with the bats that are infected with all the fleas, and I can drive to the flea market, or excuse me, the seafood market. And the fleas get out on all the live animals. Remember, there's live animals at the market, and they make the animals sick, and their flesh now becomes infected. And so hopefully, if I'm doing a bioweapons attack, some of that is the uptake, and it works, right? And now we create a pandemic. It appears that.
Sorry, did you invite someone to the podcast?
No,
a thing just popped up about joining.
No, you're getting hacked. NATO is hacking you.
Shout out NATO. Sorry for interrupting you. I was just thinking. I was like, I'm pretty OCD about scheduling. Sorry, keep going.
NATO comes in, or not NATO, but somebody. Kiev is the number one thing that hacks my podcasts and live broadcasts. It's always Kiev. And I worked with a guy who worked out of Kiev, the NABU crime unit there, called Dmitry Alperovich, and he writes all these hacking algorithms. And so I want to think it's Dmitry. But anyway, Dimitri, if you're out there, hi, how you doing? Tommy waves for all the radio listeners.
Wave to the NSA, wave to the FBI. I'm waiting for it. I'm waiting for the day. I always say it. I say, hey, Fort Meade, just turn the lights on and off. Just blink them for
Let me know you're here.
know you're here.
Well, there is a company, by the way, you mentioned Fort Meade, you mentioned the NSA. There is a company called Black and Veatch that built all these biolabs in Ukraine and just finished a big new, brand new, shiny one in Odessa. And they're based out of Overland, Kansas, where Sprint is in Kansas, near Kansas City. $3.7 billion family-run business, 100 years, et cetera. But they do all of the NSA locations. They do one here in Georgia, which is called Sweet Tea. It's the location that monitors all the conversations from the Middle East and North Africa. So they do what the SCIFs, the secure communications facilities. So it's obvious that, well, not obvious, but it is true that the people building the biolabs are also the same people who build our most secure communications facilities with the NSA. Now, if you're collecting samples from Elsie the cow, I don't think you need to have a hot wire to the NSA. Just saying. Maybe you do because the Russians could be attacking or something. I don't know. But it is interesting how Black and Veatch, which is typically on the high end of construction, that does the most secure locations, is the same people building the biolabs. Typically, you would only do that if you were housing top secret military locations. And the Russians, in this statement and the statement before by the other Schwarzkopf guy, I call him Kona Coffee, is Kona Skirilev or whatever his name is. They assess that 2 of the floors on these locations are U.S. Army classified locations. So nobody knows what's going on there. If they could say that it's diagnostics and collection on all the other 5 floors, but you don't know, and I don't know, and nobody knows what's happening on those other 2 floors. And the big question is why, and why are we funding it? And why is Black and Veatch doing the secure tunnel back to Washington, D.C. and NSA if it's not a top secret program? I mean, top secret program.
Yeah, why build a SCIF if you're just not, if I had a SCIF in my apartment, although that would be in my right to do that, the reality is like, hey, Tommy, like, don't be surprised if all of a sudden they're paying more attention to you, because why is there an electronic black hole in your apartment? Again, not going into the implications of that and your privacy, sure, but just at the surface level, if you're not doing anything there, why do you have a SCIF?
If you're just collecting pig blood samples, which they've had a lot of outbreaks of swine flu or bird flu samples with the chickens, you just don't seem to need that level. But anyway, let's talk about the pig thing, because African swine flu, again, as the name suggests, you would think this would be something that would hammer African animals. Okay. And typically in wars of attrition, low intensity warfare, the first thing you can do if you want to knock out the enemy is kill their livestock, because then they starve to death. In Vietnam, they used to say you kill the water buffalo that the family has, you may as well kill the family, right? So African swine flu has been used in a warfare situation in Africa. Now, all of a sudden that shows up at this Odessa lab, right? Now, I'm not saying that they haven't had outbreaks of African swine flu. I'm not saying that there isn't pork that goes from Africa to Ukraine. But the last time I checked, Ukraine had plenty of hog farmers. That's just like every time you see one of these scenes from Ukraine, there's always 10 pigs behind them. Why are we importing African? But whatever, the Russians found it was important enough to mention. And it ties this to taking this swine flu and trying to passage it through various animals, like you mentioned, with the fleas and the mice, to humans, to make it infect humans. Now, why would you do that if it's not an offensive program? Were you afraid that somebody out there who was taking a pig to market might have a chemistry set at home and then might do that. And so now you have to figure out a defense for that. It's a very rare.
Yeah, it's I mean, I get, like, let's just play devil's advocate. I mean, you do have to, right, develop defense, right? You can't have ICBMs without simultaneously developing anti-ballistic missiles or SDI or lasers or, you know, bomb sniffers, or even right after 9/11, right? All those programs with DTRA and DARPA, the battlefield vaccines, like, sure, but this is almost too close to COVID, where we had to develop gain of function to see what happens. It's almost too close to where you're going, hold on. Like, we just saw, let's just, again, I don't believe it, but let's give them the benefit of the doubt. Maybe that's really what they were trying to do with gain of function. I don't believe that at all, but let's just say that. Okay. We saw that the road to hell is paved with good intentions. You tried to do this, it broke from a lab, 5 million people are dead. Okay. You're not doing it again, right? You're not using that same logic to do it again 2 years later, where the Russians just so happen to have been invading and found this just by chance. That's kind of where I'm coming down on it. Sorry.
No, I like it. I like it. It's like, it can't always be, I call it Miss Mother O'Leary's with the lantern, kicking over the lantern, and that's what burned down half of Chicago. Or Mrs. O'Leary's lantern is what they say caused the Chicago fire. Okay. It's never the fact that I had designs on half of Chicago and putting elevators in buildings on half of Chicago and, buying real estate for pennies on the dollar that wasn't insured land, and then owning the Chicago skyline. It's never that. It's always Mrs. O'Leary. But if Mrs. O'Leary kicks over the lantern again
in another city, now there needs to be a special counsel. Who's Miss O'Leary? Where's she getting her Bitcoin funding from? Is this dark money?
Something, the O'Learys need a little investigation. I'll just read this thing about the African swine flu. Let you make the decisions. Again, they probably had better things to do. They could have been golfing, in New York here when they called the Security Council meeting. But they chose to say, we are considered in the year 2007, a strain of African swine flu with high contagiousness was constructed in the Georgian Biological Laboratory, which is subordinate to the Pentagon. So this Dilyana did a big workup on that as well, and said there was offensive bioweapons programs going on there. And again, that's right before the 2008 incursion by the Soviets. And also, did the Soviets invade Georgia because of this bioweapons attack? Now, this could be precedent. This could be why Putin decided to go to preempt this, because this is top of mind, not me. It's top of mind of the foreign minister in front of the Security Council. He's saying, you guys did this before, and then we went in to control the ethnic cleansing before in Georgia, and now we're doing the same thing in Ukraine. That's what he's saying in his message here. I don't know if he has proof of this or not, but he's saying that somebody has taken a version of African swine flu and constructed it, a chimera, something never existed in nature before. Okay. So, okay, which is subordinate to the Pentagon. Okay. Again, Black and Veatch, I believe, built this. The spread caused significant economic damage to a number of states, including Ukraine and Poland, and excluded them from a number of pork exporters. So it economically damaged this group. Now, that's also another place. The Azov Brigade is very active, and this Kolomoisky is running and financing this Azov Brigade. So again, it seems like the Azov Brigade is a target of the Russians. That's what Putin has said, this Nazi group. If you notice, the tanks are all either Z or O or V or A, when they've done all their markings. It seems like they're trying to send the message, we're here to get the Azovs. So again, speculation, but again, it's interesting how the Russian tanks and trucks and all that use those 4 letters.
Noticed that. I had noticed that. I wasn't sure.
I mean, it could be just that they just decided to choose the same 4 letters, but
Might just be a coincidence that those soldiers used to just write, what was it, Happy Easter, Adolf, on the shells they were using as they were approaching Berlin. So that was just a coincidence.
Yeah. Well, I also think maybe some people say, well, the Cyrillic alphabet and the what is ours is the Greek Roman alphabet share the same letters, so that NATO forces would recognize the Z. Whereas if they use a Cyrillic letter, they might get shot by a friend or foe. So there's arguments both ways. I just think it's everything points and overlaps in a mosaic. Not all, like, we don't have the smoking gun other than the foreign minister actually saying it, but we don't have like all the documents, the invasion plan with all the maps saying, okay, General O'Reilly is going to attack here, and then Pat, and then Bradley. We don't have the order of battle, but that's hard to get. Those are hard to get. But I'm just saying that he made a point of mentioning it at the Security Council.
It is an insane thing to kind of entertain. Like, did that happen in Georgia? Did it happen in Crimea? Is it happening again? Is it happening again and again, to where, yeah, if they think that there is an offensive biological weapon program, if they think it's their Cuban Missile Crisis, yeah, you would go in and without hesitation, you'd knock it to hell.
And now another one.
Okay.
In 2014, he mentions, right before the revolution, that unseated Yanukovych, same sort of thing, with a softening of the defenses, with a maybe a planned outbreak. And so he talks about this. At the same time, the activity of biological laboratories that, according to our data, has been intensified since 2014 in the so-called Ukrainian healthcare system reforming program implemented by the United States has led to an unimaginable increase in hazard in disease and caused important infection morbidity. So he's saying that this also happened not only in 2008, 2007 in Georgia, but now in the 2014 overthrow. He's basically intimating that bioweapons may have been involved. So this is like third time's a charm. Are we going to watch the third strike go by us and be called out, or are we going to protect the plate? You play baseball, didn't you, Tommy?
No, but I know. Yeah,
you got my analogy here.
Yes.
So it says here that there has been noted instances of rubella, diphtheria, tuberculosis cases in Ukraine, a substantial increase. The incidence of measles has increased more than 100 times.
Since when?
Well, I don't have that. The World Health Organization has declared Ukraine a country with high risk of polio outbreak. I think one of the things you mentioned is, hey, well, kids, polio, Ukraine is only 34% vaccinated, right? Hey, Joe Biden.
You should be chastising them as a nation.
That's something that you would want to do. I wonder how many people of the Donbass, what their vaccination rate is. Because if you're, trying to take them out.
If this is a pandemic of the unvaccinated, I think, do we stand with Putin? Are they going in there with do we know that they're using bullets? Are they not vaccine needles?
Well, I think it's horrible. I mean, you and I both don't like war, right?
No, of course not. There are kids. There are kids getting their limbs blown off. It's the
Yeah.
same thing as making a 9/11 joke or a JFK joke.
Right, right,
I make suicide jokes. I lost a brother to suicide. You make it because it takes the edges off of it. You dull the corners. So
right.
anyone that
Absolutely.
thinks their panties in a bundle, I,
No, that's fine. I just wanted to get for the
yeah, yeah,
record
yeah,
that we're doing the gallows humor, and we certainly don't like the fact that Putin felt like his back was against the wall. This is the sixth incursion by NATO going east toward Russia. They made a promise, the Budapest agreements, they wouldn't go east, and now here's the sixth nation. And now, if it is going to enable a bioweapons attack like 2008 in Georgia and 2014 for Yanukovych, who was democratically elected, okay, that was an overthrow by the CIA. That maybe this was the third strike, and he couldn't watch that third strike. He had to protect the plate. I'm not trying to make excuses for Putin, but I'm just trying to say that this is what the Russians are saying yesterday, and I'm just trying to report what the Russians actually said, because everything that you see is Russian lies, Russian disinformation. We're all agents of Putin, and we never actually hear what they say.
yeah. And I mean, not to beat a dead horse, because I know we've gone over this, and I've done it not just with George, but with a ton of guests recently. Is I have to, like, by rational logic deducing principle, question everything that's going on right now, because I mean, we just finished 2 years of COVID, and I saw a media blitz, a narrative, and if you deviated from that narrative, you were a Nazi. So it doesn't matter what it is. It doesn't matter if it's Ukraine. It doesn't matter if it's a media blitz out of nowhere that everyone should buy green balloons for birthday parties. It doesn't matter what it is. When I see an all-out and seemingly sudden, instantaneous, and uniform media blitz to push one narrative forward, and an instant demonification of the opponent, and you cannot even, it's not that you can't even side with Putin. You can't even say, can I hear all the sides? You can't even say, can we play devil's advocate? Can I just see where they come? Can I just, no. So that is where, like, my mind is on all of this. It has nothing to do with Ukraine. I don't care. When I see all of this, I'm inclined to say we have to start stripping it down to its component pieces. Or in 2 years, are we going to be looking back at this the same way we're now are looking back at 2 weeks to flatten the curve? You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. Tommy, you had a great meme with the monkeys when the monkeys got out of the.
Oh yeah. Out of the,
And just take everybody through that, because then I want to do the bats next.
oh yeah, no, it was right. That was a couple months ago, and that it was like when they were realizing Omicron wasn't kind of cutting it, wasn't scaring everybody, and like a truck full of monkeys that were diseased like turned over in like Boston or something.
No, it was in mid Pennsylvania.
Whatever the hell.
It left Boston. Yeah, it was from Boston. Yeah.
It was the CIA's B team. It was just, it was some bullshit like, oh, like a truck leaving like a castle on a rainy night with, monkeys with red eyes, and oh, the truck driver falls asleep at the wheel and it flips over, and it's, I mean, it seems like the beginning montage of like, like the Powder Puff Girls, or like Pinky and the Brain, or like a cartoon or something. It's like, we all know how this happened, or like Peter Parker being bit by the spider. It's like on a night it took a sharp turn and the monkeys came out, and it seems like the CIA's B team. Like COVID, they did COVID pretty well. This was a sloppy sequel. This was a money grab. This was Anchorman 2, right? They came out and they just, that's what it was. And that's what it seems like, is you're looking at it and you're like, is this just demoralization? Are they showing you they don't give a shit?
Yeah.
But if there are,
well, you and I did that show about a month ago, maybe, or maybe it was a little more than that.
A little longer.
It was maybe 6 weeks or 2 months. And you and I both thought we were done with animals escaping, pathogenic animals escaping to create pandemics. We both were wrong because yesterday, again, I hate to go to the foreign minister, but that's where we get the 140 cages of flea bitten bats. And these can fly. They're a lot better than monkeys. These are actually flying monkeys. They call the bats the flying monkeys, right? So now we have flying monkeys.
But again, it's just a shitty sequel. And now they can fly from the heart of a war, from Marvel Avengers Zelensky to the evil Vladimir Putin. From this cavalcade of forces comes the diseased bats, and it's like, guys, like, can we just like, come on, just launch a nuke. Like, if you're gonna do it, at least have the balls of like a Stalin or an Eisenhower. Just do it. Stop with these window dressings. Just straight up say, yeah, we're gonna kill all of y'all. I would kind of respect that. I would kind of, if Klaus came out and was just like, a 19 out of every 20 of y'all gotta go. I'd be like, demon, but thank you for your straightforwardness.
Yeah, but see, if we kill you, Tommy, we can't harvest your B cells, which could then make the best monoclonal antibody for the next vaccine. So we don't want to do that. We want to keep you alive and just make you sick and harvest you. Yeah, it was in this thing. I won't go into it. I won't keep reading, but it is something that you should check out, and you can see it on C-SPAN. C-SPAN's the only place that covered it. None of the networks, PBS, nobody. And RT's off the air completely, and Sputnik's not far behind. So we're it, Tommy.
I say we keep going into it. George, you know the drill. I'm going to use the restroom.
Okay.
George, tell everybody where they can find you, where they can find Neighborhood News Studio, your Twitter, all that good stuff.
Sure. Well, you're listening to Tommy Carrigan, the Tommy Carrigan podcast. It can be found at Rumble under Tommy's podcast. And of course, I'm your host, at least on this side of the Mason-Dixon line, in beautiful Atlanta, Georgia. My name is George Webb, and I work. You can find me weekdays at noon at neighborhoodnews.com, for 2 hours of news and analysis every day. And then, of course, on weekends, you can find me here with Tommy Carrigan. And also occasionally I do a podcast with Peter Duke, the great Peter Duke, the Hollywood creative consultant, working with many of Hollywood's best documentarians for fact-based documentary that tend to be on the conservative side. So that's called the Reality OS, Peter Duke. I am on Twitter. Most of my communication to my audience is through Twitter at Real George Webb 1, the numeral 1. I know it's a long story. I got hacked. Everything was destroyed on my Twitter. 4.5 years of work. So I had to end up with a real long Twitter name, Real George Webb 1 on Twitter. And while Tommy is taking a well-deserved break, I'll just point everybody to the source document that I've been reading from. It's called The Statement of the Chief Nuclear, Biological, and Chemical Protection of Troops, Federation Armed Forces Lieutenant General Igor Korilov, dated March 7th, 2022. And of course, yesterday he presented that same information to the Security Council, the UN Security Council. I actually watched it from beginning to end. And of the folks that commented, I thought, of course, most people said this Putin, this is lies and so forth, unsubstantiated, and just went back to this is a horrible incursion. But the Russian minister did mention the fact that none other than Colin Powell waved a vial of yellow cake to justify not only an invasion with shock and awe bombing, indiscriminate bombing, not precision bombing, but shock and awe bombing of Baghdad, but then also followed it up with a 20-year invasion and occupation, right? So the Russian general did not mention that this was sort of Putin's Cuban Missile Crisis, but we will mention it when Tommy joins us here, when he puts his headphones on. Tommy, you don't need to put headphones on.
Headphones. I'm ready to rock.
Well, I just wanted to go over one thing. Oh, you got something you got a shirt that you wanted to show?
Oh, no. It's a blanket. I use I keep my air conditioner low. I always have a blanket.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I forgot you're in Maryland and
Yeah.
you're in the Eastern Shore there. Still cold. Still cold here today too. I don't want to kid anybody, but
I keep it cold year round. It doesn't matter where I am. I keep the air conditioner blasting.
Oh, okay. Well, I got some light coming in here, so if I look like I'm suffering a nuclear explosion, don't worry about it. You you never hear it. Just
Yeah, it's just that. Have you ever put like a paper plate in a fire or something, and you know how it sits there and all of a sudden just goes and
yeah,
it goes.
yeah.
I realized, I think it was last summer, or maybe it was over Christmas. I was up at my parents' place and I threw a paper plate into the fireplace and was just watching it. And I realized just how similar that does sound to those nuclear weapon videos where it's the thermal pulse instantly igniting everything.
Yeah.
I've never thought about that.
The wave of well, I was going to say that there was 2 rounds at the Security Council. The member can call the meeting. Russia called the meeting, and then everybody commented and said what a bad idea it was. China kind of made a half statement saying we should send in WHO investigators. Ghana sort of said the same thing. We should send in investigators to get to the bottom of it. Mexico kind of said something along that line, but most everybody said Putin disinformation. We shouldn't take these charges seriously. But then Russia had a chance to retort, and they pulled out the Colin Powell vial that justified the invasion of Iraq. And they said, hey, not only did you invade, you used shock and awe indiscriminate weapons instead of precision weapons. And you bragged about it when you did that. And then you stayed for 20 years after denuding the country of all the resources. So you're on the high horse right now because we think there's biological weapons being used, about ready to be launched against our country in a preemptive strike. And you were not attacking Canada, a biological lab that was put on the border across the Detroit River from Detroit. You were attacking somebody who was 7,000 miles away from your Washington, D.C., or 6,000 miles. So he made that point. He didn't make the point, which I thought was even better, which is, what did your President Kennedy do in this same exact room? I love it when you can point to the chair, or you can say in this same exact room. Okay. And that same exact table with that same exact coffee cup and that same exact United States over there. Adlai Stevenson sat right in that chair that you sit in now. And he said, Soviet missiles 90 miles from the United States will be a preemptive strike. Will authorize a preemptive strike against Cuba. Preemptive strike. Kennedy also went on national television a night later or 2 nights later and said any attack by the Soviet Union would be responded to this as a full retaliatory response against the Soviet Union. So we can't have our Cuban Missile Crisis. That's just for you guys. That was the high ground for me. Just like, wait a minute, we've been through all this in the same room. Do you want me to roll the film? I mean, it was taken right where you're sitting, No, move over a little bit. Yeah. Okay. Right there. Yeah. Just remind them that you guys pulled this crap 60 years ago. Where's the even-handedness here?
I wouldn't even say pulled this crap. I would say we justifiably defended our homeland and our immediate proximity.
Yes.
It's crap. Because if you say we justify this crap, then that comes, 2 wrongs don't make a right.
Right.
No, I would say you justifiably defended your homeland. You said that there's our nuclear tipped missiles 90 miles from your coast. There'd be no advanced warning. Why can't we do, we being the Russians, why can't we do it? I mean, why not? Why can't we do it?
I agree with Kennedy. I thought it was the right thing to do.
Yeah.
A lot of people think that those YouTube photos were doctored by one Lee Harvey Oswald when he was working in New Orleans. I'll tell you one thing. If you look at the launchers now, 60 years later, just saying they weren't ready for prime time. Yeah. They were being positioned and they were rolling them in there. And I think Kennedy got some.
It is fascinating though, is I think it's like the last 10 years or so, actually some document came out, not like US declassified, but rather like they found them in Cuba, there were when we said we're going to set up an embargo so that you can't set up like the nuclear tip, there were already nuclear weapons on the island. I think they came out in like 2011 or 2012. So had we gone in, it actually would have caused nuclear war. There were nuclear weapons, kind of like Dr. Strangelove when he attacked Plan R. There were nuclear weapons in Cuba that the Soviets had given them basically authority to use at their discretion. No, we didn't know that until like 50 years later. Thank God we didn't go in.
Yeah.
Game over.
Well, I mean, I ran down this company that Oswald worked at, which he had a Q level clearance, and he worked at this photography company that processed the YouTube Cradles film. And I just found it interesting because he was at a YouTube site in Atsugi, Japan, that then he came back and worked for a photography defense contractor. And at the same time, they were trying to convince Kennedy not to invade Cuba. And the deterrent was, hey, wait a minute, you could trigger a nuclear war. And that's the only reason Kennedy didn't press the button and do what, not a Bay of Pigs low end invasion, ragtag United Fruit type invasion, but a real invasion. So, which would have not been good for the United Fruit growers, because United Fruit wanted all the oil and sell off all the oil rights to Rockefeller. And Allen Dulles was saying, hey, we're going to clean up if we can make this a private war. If we make it a public war, we're going to have, military administrators here, but nobody's going to make any cash.
Yeah.
So anyway, that's a diversion, but this is the same sort of thing where this isn't even 90 miles over water. And Key West, let's just all be honest with each other. It's part of the United States, but man, that's stretching the definition. I mean, it's united, but those keys are about 2 lanes wide for about 30 or 40 miles. I think if we cut it off and let it go, it wouldn't kill the economy. Now, I love Key West, but the 90-mile thing is always thrown around. It's really a lot further to Miami. It's a lot further to Tampa, than the 90-mile figure. But this is 2,000 kilometers of shared border between Ukraine and Russia.
Well, that's what I was going to say is, so although the 90-mile is kind of like a bullshit thing, let's just give it to them. Let's say it is. Let's give into the American propaganda. It's still 90 miles. And as you pointed out last week, it's 90 miles over water. Now, that doesn't matter for missiles, but you would see, if they ever tried to do anything, you would see them coming amphibious. You'd see them from the horizon. It's much different than a 2,000 kilometer land border where you could legally just walk right on up, not do anything. We're just not touching you. I'm not touching you. But that's what we're seeing right now. You made that point last week, though. 2,000 kilometer land border.
And there's trade. The key point I'm making here is there's trade between the two. So you could drive a truck and it's hanging meat, and you don't know that it's bats until they open the door. And then the bats all go off into the barns, and they're full of fleas, and they flap at night, and the fleas fall onto all the farm animals, and the farm animals infect the meat and the people working on the farm animals. And pretty soon you have these breakouts. And one of the things the Russian minister said again, and I can't go through all of the breakouts, but there's just been one livestock breakout after another of novel new diseases, new combinations, new novel diseases that have never been seen before there. It's almost like you were emptying out the whole Canalabec biopreparat refrigerator and trying something new every season. I'm not saying that's what happened, but it has that cadence and metadata. And again, it's a lot more likely that you would get something that you'd seen before, like flu every year with a variant, but not something completely new and novel that nothing works. And now we need to do a rapid prototype and development of a new vaccine. Usually it's tweaking the old one.
So I think you were saying last week, you're saying Russia's got to deliver evidence. Is the sun getting in your eyes? You're saying Russia's got to deliver evidence. They have
That's
to.
why That's why my last 10 minutes has not been Tommy Kerrigan quality. I'm going to just say, literally, the sun was in my eyes. That's the excuse.
Go close your blinds. I don't give a shit. I'll monologue. Yeah, no, George is the sun's coming through the side and blinded him. That's why I live in my cave with my moving blankets, and it's blacked out. There is no sun. I control the light. I am my own god complex in my corner. But you were saying that Russia does have to provide evidence. They have to bring it up, because otherwise it is nothing more than an invasion. And even if they truly said we're going in there to get bioweapons, the reality is at that point you have to call it what it is, and it's no less of a lie than us saying we're going to get WMDs. The difference is you have to produce. And now it seems like, again, Saturday, March 12th, 2022, it seems like they are producing. Is that correct?
Yes, there's 5 troves that I received. UP8 was listed again, which is the Congo Crimea hemorrhagic fever. And the good part about the forensics here is you can follow the genealogy here, the sort of the phylogeny of how things mutate and so forth, and see where they came from, where they could and couldn't have come from, the furin cleavage sites we've talked about in the past. And then there are certain proteins when they show up out of the blue, where the thing's been living for, African swine fever has been around since, I don't know, 50s or something like that. And it all of a sudden sprouts a new mechanism for making its own proteins. And again, it's that same remdesivir ability to block the ability to make new proteins. So it's a catch-all for everything that they announce. It has that same signature of here's Warren Buffett, here's the remdesivir, here's Sovaldi, another Gilead drug. Again, these are being tested there in Ukraine over and over. And it just seems like they keep going back to this sort of Nazi, I don't want to say Nazi charm, but it's the same shield mechanism, which is this thing called RDRP, which is RNA dependent RNA polymerase. RNA polymerase, all that means is I can make my own proteins. It's sort of like if I got my arm shot off, I could make my own arm and regenerate my own arm. Pretty handy for a virus, right? If I can stop the ability of the virus to basically grow itself out from a heart, and I could stop that, then I stop the soldier. Okay. This RDRP is that mechanism. So every virus that uses RDRP, uses RNA polymerase, can be stopped with this sort of charm. And that's what the remdesivir has. And that's why I keep thinking they're testing the remdesivir over and over and over again for Ebola and HIV and Corona, and it never works, and they never care because they want it to know that it stops the virus. In Corona, it comes up with this non-specific protein, the protein's inside the cell, not outside the cell, in a non-specific protein 12, I believe it is. But it's one of the non-specific proteins that nobody really talks about. But again, without that one thing, it's sort of like a car, without a critical component, it doesn't work. And you only need to take one component out, let's say, the drive shaft or the connective tissue between the motor and the gears, and that stops the car. So it does, the feel of this, when I look at all the Sovaldi testing, which is the anti-Hep C drug that Gilead's testing there in these labs. There's many labs doing testing in Ukraine, by the way, not just Gilead. And then the remdesivir, it seems to always go back, to this RNA making capability and inhibiting the RNA capability with the new vaccines. That's what they're working on in Odessa. No speculation here. Again, we're encroaching in on what it has to be from several different fronts, sort of like the walls are closing in on what they have to be doing. And that's how I'm approaching it. So I don't know if that makes any sense, Tommy. But,
no, it does. I can only imagine that's kind of where this like defend Ukraine hysteria, because this wasn't here in 2014 with Crimea. Maybe I'm just not remembering it. I don't think this was there in 2008 with Georgia. It seems like this hysteria to we need to defend, we need a no-fly zone, it seems like they're protecting something. You're really freaking out about don't look in there, don't look behind that door. I don't care about these other doors, but don't. And it seems like that's where it's all coming together. Do you think COVID was purely Wuhan, or is there going to be like a wild card in here? Is there going to be a plot twist? Are they going to find that there was, and this is again just kind of throwing it out there, are they going to find gain of function SARS-CoV-2 research being done in Odessa?
Yeah, I think we already know that the bat corona stuff has been done in Odessa, and Kiev is going to be the one that really, when Putin takes the lab in Kiev, this is why I say Putin wants that lab. He's not going. You haven't seen down there by Maiden Square. They have the cams on it all the time. There's nothing going on down there. There's no action. There's no shooting. Nothing. People are putting some sandbags up and whatnot, but Putin isn't. He's just not moving toward that. He took the command and control center, the army base out by the airport where the zoo was, but that was it. And I think he's trying to find where the other base is. I don't know that that's published. I call them the triggering bio labs, the ones that might have triggered the invasion. One is certainly Odessa. The other one they said Lavrov said was Kiev. The foreign minister said it was Kiev. I don't know the address. I'd love to know the address, because if I was trying to predict the pincer movements coming forward and the double envelopment movements that are going to be thrown down, it's going to be around that lab. Now, people can say whatever they want on the internet. We're just doing analysis and reading the tea leaves as we see them. We're not making any claims like we can predict the future. We're just saying, hey, given the state of the chessboard, here's the next move that I think is going to be made. And that would prove to the world, I think Kiev is kind of like the last capturing the, closing in on a king, in this game, in this chessboard game.
What are we going to see? Do you think, are we going to see Zelensky, if he is, let's give him the benefit of the doubt, maybe he's not entirely a CIA shill. If he truly is looking out for Ukraine, do you think that if Putin were to give an ultimatum about giving up the labs and we'll completely go home, do you think Zelensky would do that? Because now it would be in Zelensky's power to stop the slaughter like that, and he would have to take it.
Well, I don't think Kolomoisky would let him.
Yeah.
Because he is kind of put in there, installed by Kolomoisky. I think Putin, I think you're very much on the right track of a diplomatic solution, though, is you give me the labs and you give me the paperwork. I know that the chemicals are gone, but you give me the paperwork like we got from the other labs, and we can prove our case, then we go home. And I don't think Putin wants to unseat and is looking for a regime change like we were looking for with Saddam Hussein. I don't think that we're looking for that.
At first, it seemed like it was that, but now I'm taking the Webb hypothesis. I think this was entirely about labs.
Well, look at where the airstrikes were. I mean, let's say you wanted to go, there's 11 labs and they're distributed all over Ukraine. You're going to have special forces need to go in physically on the ground. You have to take out the local air support, helicopter air support. Otherwise, your Spetsnaz are going to be ground beef. That means you have to take out the air cover. You have to take out the MiG-29s and the 31s. I think they only have 29s. So that was the first thing. It's kind of like air canopy, got to go. And then the helicopters, air dominance is achieved. And now Spetsnaz can come in. And you're going to have snipers after that. And that's small shoulder fired rocket with the laser thing. It seems to be their way of taking out, doing the echolocation on the sniper and just taking out the whole little apartment. And that's why I think you do have 325 civilian casualties, but that's a really low number when you consider the civilian casualties in the first 7 days of shock and awe, or first 14 days of shock and awe in Iraq.
Or
Let me
20,
tell you.
or 20 years, 1.5 million.
Yeah. I mean, but even in that first time, if you compare the two time periods, the numbers are just, I mean, that's another thing is you could take poker chips and bring them in. Every one of these chips represents 100 deaths. And here's my 3 chips and here's your stack, what you guys did in Iraq. Again, two wrongs don't justify a right. But I think every American would understand what you said about Kennedy. You would go fight. I would go fight and take out missiles in Cuba.
Sure.
Because that's bullshit.
That's the end of the world. That's the end of the world.
Yeah. I mean, I would go in a heartbit. We interviewed this McDuff guy who was actually one of the planners of the invasion. So, why can't we see that through Russian eyes? And Kolomoisky, I just think that he would be assassinated if he ever gave up the Kiev biolab. But this next week, we're going to have the answer. And there's these 6 tranches of documents that are in Russian. And unfortunately, the way the document is, I can't translate it in chunks. So I'm going to need a week, but I'll get more on the different programs and so forth. And Baxter Healthcare is also there. They're also a Chicago-based health company that Rahm Emanuel has been associated with. Abbott Labs and AbbVie was the vaccine spinoff of Abbott. He's been associated with, finding these antibodies, and we've been following him for 6 years with these illegal labs. So we have some threads back to Rahm Emanuel in this, working with Kolomoisky. And there's also threads between Eric Prince and Blackwater. Ballard Petroleum, which was something that Eric Prince invested in and Kolomoisky invested in a lot of Cleveland real estate that Kolomoisky bought. So we not only have Eric Prince training a private army and potentially training the Azov Brigade, the Dnepr Brigade, and the Adair Brigade, but we now also have them laundering the money in the takings through this Ballard Petroleum. So there's a lot of strings to pull on here in the next week.
Would you rather we wait until the next episode to go into those to get more data, or is there anything we can still touch on now? I'm up for whatever.
I feel a little uncomfortable going forward without more examination of the evidence, but we can talk about anything else you want to talk about. I don't have a time limit problem. I just think, well, let's press pause on that. Stay tuned for next week for the analysis
on the Blackwater and shit. Yeah, no, I'm fine with that. No. So again, back to what we do have. Is there anything that I haven't brought up or that you've wanted to bring up that we haven't yet, that doesn't have to do with speculation, that isn't dependent on further analysis or further unfoldings? Is there anything that we maybe haven't touched on of things that have happened that we know for a fact have happened, concrete evidence that just for whatever reason has slipped both our minds?
Well, there's one, I'll end it here with a wacky thing. And these things, I tell you, when you read these bioweapons projects, they're wacky. But one of them had to do, and the Russians mentioned this again yesterday, is this migratory birds. Okay. So using migratory birds, usually what they do is concentrate on birds of prey. I mean, birds that are prey, like, geese and ducks and so forth that are hunted, and go into the food supply. And infecting them in one place. And then when they migrate back north, then they take their, you just can't believe that you would have, this is, was read out by the guy in front of the Security Council that they were trying to do this with bird flu. H5N1, H3N2, or H5N1, there's combinations of both bird flu and swine flu that have been put together. And so I'm not sure on which H's it is. I thought maybe H3N2, but I could be wrong. Could be H5N1. But using migratory birds as an offensive weapon. Now this goes all the way back to carrier pigeons in World War I. And it probably goes all the way back to the Battle of Kafka or Kaffa with the Muslim hordes and the Ottomans and the Christians at Constantinople and St. Elmo's fire there and the Battle of Malta, Siege of Malta. So, I mean, animals have been used for a long time to vector plague and so forth. Plague also was cited. Anti-plague stations were cited on the Russian border as well by the Russians. So there's just some very historically very old Knights of Malta stuff that is being brought up. And I'm wondering, is this one of those deals where we're going to get all the real documentation out and we're going to leave a treasure trove of stuff to throw you off, like you say, deception, Sun Tzu. Yeah. I don't know. It sounds so wacky that, you can't believe it.
I don't think any of it's wacky. I mean, so like, what is all of this at its rawest form? This is posturing for power. Forget Cuban Missile Crisis, forget Ukraine, remove the names from it. What is it? It's defensive empire, be it ours, be it Russia, be it China, be it whatever. It's posturing for power. And after this, then there's bigger pictures, right? Where you're posturing for, can we take on an entire other nation? It's global hegemony. It's the oldest game played, and it's been going from, the first place leadership trophy has been passed from empire to empire, Spain or Britain or France or Egypt or China or whatever. When you remember and realize that that's what this is, nothing is off the table, all the way up to global thermonuclear war. So the idea, when you accept that a possible outcome, that it is technologically possible that right now a button is pushed and a 200-foot tall missile goes up to Mach 23 and it's carrying a thermonuclear warhead, or 10 of them, each one 100 times, 1,000 times stronger than the one on Hiroshima. When you accept that that is a physical possibility right now, as it was 60 years ago, everything below that is automatically still on the table, including deception and leaving treasure troves and sea spray-like activities and social media manipulation and, removing Russia from the SWIFT banking. It's all, once you establish that literal and figurative upper echelon of what's possible, orbital nuclear weapons, everything under that comes into play. And so, no, I don't think it's goofy. I don't think it's goofy at all. Do you think, because Russia's not existing in a vacuum, the CIA is in there. Do you think we might release a bioagent preemptively and then say, this is what Russia's trying to cover up, is they just released this bioagent on the innocent, stunning, and brave people of Ukraine, and now they're trying to say it was the United States, but the reality is they did it.
Absolutely. And sometimes I think, is this whole thing just I hate to say Rothschild or
a Schwabian play.
Yeah, where you just have both sides attack.
Not even real.
Everyone leaves. We get everything between us. The victors goes.
It might be.
So let's say that the more I see out of Putin and the more I see out of the Russian ministry, unless they come up with better stuff than the migratory birds and the bats, I want to see more evidence.
Yeah.
But they've released a lot. But having said that, I do think we will be getting a lot more information in the next week, and so we'll be able to look at it with more of a precision. And I was going to mention to you a couple of other things that the Russian minister said, but they're slipping my mind right now. I just think the calling a Security Council meeting just doesn't happen that often.
No.
I can't remember the last time Russia called a Security Council meeting. And usually you don't do that unless you got the juice, unless you got the proof. And I guess that's my final um, comment is I don't think you do this unless there's a good reason.
And you normally do it like we did in 03. You do it before a war. You never, in the midst of the chaos and fog of war, you never go, time out. Look what we just found. Look what we just found. You don't do that. That's what's kind of absurd. And wasn't Russia censured?
At that meeting, they were censured.
I thought they were censured by the UN. I could be fake news. I might be wrong.
That could be true. I might have missed that on the
No. I don't think you did. Regardless, they're calling for the meeting. Regardless of the censorship, that's absurd.
Yeah, I think maybe in Syria 2014 they might have 11 of the 12 members of the Common Independent States signed a declaration in 1991. Oh, that's the 11. Well, when did Russia become a member? 1991. The Russian Federation became a member of the Security Council. And of course, that was, yeah. So I'll have to go into the history here and see when they voted, but it just doesn't seem like something you would do unless you had a substantial amount of proof. Maybe it is trying to justify their actions. But Russia blocked Security Council actions on Ukraine. I don't know what those would have been, but there it is, United Nations News on the 25th of November. So there's certainly, yeah, it said that UN Security Council made a resolution that immediately stop and withdraw all of its troops, stop the attack, which was one day into the attack. 193 member General Assembly, but the Security Council is obviously a much smaller group. I'll have more next week, but it seems like there's another shoe to drop with Kiev. I guess that's the bottom line. And then the other one I would say is there's 5 labs maybe on the western side in Lviv. Lviv on a jet plane is maybe this theme of next week's, because there's 3 labs out there. And anytime I see like the ones in Kiev, an animal, monkey, and human all right next to each other, that to me says passaging. Now that may not be true. It may be just the fact that they build them all together and it's easier to get parking lots for medical students. I don't know. Maybe. It's near the train line, but that's also a perfect place to go from monkey to mouse to monkey to human. And we saw that same thing in South Korea. So in Australia with CSIRO, so it's just a repeating pattern that is here in the United States. We had the monkey experiments up in Bethesda here in the United States at the Naval Hospital there in Maryland. These pathogens, that's the other thing. The Russians, maybe that's what I forgot. The Russians had said that these new survivor B cells and blood samples were being taken back to Bethesda for evaluation and the Naval Hospital for evaluation, meaning they were, available to be leaked to pharmaceutical interests for developing monoclonal antibodies. If you find the one guy who lives and 99 die, that B cell becomes extremely valuable as a monoclonal antibody. So I think we got a lot to talk about next week.
Yeah, and not only that, I was kind of on a side note. I'd been thinking, like, you think of how valuable like a human body is, right? You think of just how, you can't, not yet, but that's why there's a pretty penny on organs. That's why research is so expensive. That's because we have all those pesky rules about how you got to do it on animals and not people. But if you think about like the marriage of corporation and state, or at least the backdoor uses, like the revolving contracts with the military industrial complex, or think everything about the Dulles brothers. One thing I've just been thinking kind of on a side note for the last couple months was like an extraordinary rendition program in the CIA, where I mean, you're taking someone to Tunisia and putting him in a basement, and they're never heard from again, and they get rid of the body. If you were a smart person, an evil person, but if you were a smart person, once you were finished with your torture and trying to get intelligence out of them, or even if you're just in Guantanamo, no, you'd want a black site. You wouldn't want any records. Why would you not have like a contact with Big Pharma and be like, hey, male, 38 years old, whatever, of Arab descent, you got anything you want to test on them? Why go through those pesky $15 billion FDA trials? You send over your own black team, go in there, you get that data, and now you are that many steps ahead of your rival pharma corporation. That's one thing.
Absolutely. This has been done. That's another thing the Russians said is not only being done on the military in Ukraine, but military in NATO as well. These tests were being done. And go back to the Jews in the Holocaust. And you know what's interesting is somebody mentioned this to me is, talking about the Owl Mountains and all the bats and so forth. And a lot of the Jews worked in underground facilities, caves, man-made caves, like Nordhausen, Mittelwerk, and all that for the U-2 and stuff, or for the V1, V2. That they had to have a mammal that lived and could survive on insects in caves. They couldn't use the pork model because they need grass and sunlight. They couldn't use the bird model because the birds wouldn't. So in order to conduct the underground testing, you had to use bats. Plus bats are regressive on the phylogenetic scale, that they don't have an immune system like the developed mammalian immune system, so that you could grow anything you wanted in the bats and they'd keep multiplying. So if you were working in the Nazi labs after the war, bats were your only option. So your knowledge base around bats as a reservoir would be really good. And now after the war, you could bring it above ground. But again, if you want to stay covert, you've got to make the bats a part of your, your daily diet, as it were. And, I went to Columbus and we went to where these two guys that seem to be running bioweapons for Kolomoisky were, this Fruman and Parnas. We have the IP addresses, we have their clearances, the whole thing. They're also going to Redstone Arsenal. They're also going and getting their DIA credentials at Fort Huachuca. They're also going to China before the breakout, the live exercise at the Wuhan games, the military games, these Fruman and Parnas guys. And they're going to a place called Battelle Labs. Oh, and they manage Fort Detrick. I know it's just a wacky coincidence that it's Battelle, but that's where they get, these two Ukrainian guys have their clearance. So we need whistleblowers. I ran into one in 2017 and said, the Bidens are doing the energy. They're not doing the nefarious stuff. That's all the farther they would really tell me. Gave me a little bit of indication that it was in Ukraine and it had to do with Warren Buffett. I thought it meant oil. I thought it meant uranium in Kazakhstan. It turned out that was right, with Hunter Biden going and getting Kazakhstan uranium for Warren Buffett. But also my partner didn't miss it, but she was honing in on Gilead's remdesivir, Gilead's Sovaldi. Gilead is all these things that provide this kind of Nazi charm. So to get out of jail free, or whatever you want to call it, the universal vaccine. So that's a lot. This is kind of the potpourri at the end, where I really haven't formulated any theory or anything working theory. I'm just saying it's just interesting information. Yeah.
But this is how you get to it's kind of like how the sausage is made, is whenever you look at something and someone figures something out and you go, oh, put another coin in the George Webb was right jar or the Alex Jones was right jar. What you're not seeing though is the very messy process of, what we've been doing, you and I have been doing this whole podcast. We're just throwing out ideas, and most of them in a year we'll look back at and go, oh God, that was so wildly off the mark. But that's how you approach the thing, is you create models, and you have to kind of remove ego and embarrassment. And you just have to realize, like, I'm probably wrong, but by removing those constraints and the labels of misinformation, it allows creativity to flow, and you can just start taking different approaches at it. You go, maybe COVID was a dry run for a genetic based genocidal vaccine or virus against Russia, or maybe this is who knows, maybe this is Russian disinformation, or maybe this is, big pharma doing black site research. I mean, are all probably wildly off the mark. But by doing that, and by not really having any reservations or embarrassments about it, and being okay with being wrong, that allows the mind to kind of open up. And it's like what they say about the importance of, like, like business owners or like military tacticians. They always say, like, think about your biggest existing problem as you're falling asleep, because as you fall asleep, the existing kind of constraints about reality. I got to sit up straight. I got to, make sure I make eye contact with George. I'm sitting in a chair. I'm thirsty. As you are in bed and you're kind of unleashing like the shackles of culture, and you go to sleep, you're also unleashing your mind. They always say, just do that. That's why you get those, you're falling asleep. What's like the stereotype? You're falling asleep. Brilliant idea. You get put it on the phone, write it down. Because you start to decompartmentalize the brain, different creative processes, and you look at things from a different angle. Now, that might mean that you're wildly incorrect, like, who knows, probably most of what we're saying. But this is, I think, important for the end of the episode, is you got to throw it all at the wall. We don't know what's coming. We have no idea what you and I are going to be discussing next week. So even though next week hindsight will be 2020, right now we are not at next week. There is an event horizon right in front of us, and we see a bunch of different possible things forming in different shapes and ideas, but we don't know what it is. So for me, I would say let's just kind of go with final speculations. I would say, given everything we have, and given that whole rant that I could be wrong, I feel like we're going to see, there are two most likely things, and it's either a complete expose of what the lab researchers are doing, and it's going to shift the narrative, or we're going to see a preemptive release of a bioagent by the CIA. Obviously, we won't know it's the CIA, but you'll know it's the CIA, and that will ratchet up the demonization of Russia. Those are kind of my two immediate theories. What's your immediate theory, George? And then we'll wrap it up.
I think the 3 labs in Kiev, and then producing the documents, and then next week's show after that, it's the 3 labs in Lviv. Maybe throw in Ternopil and throw in the one that's to the right, it's like Vizhnitsia or something like that. Those 5. But I think there's a pincer with Lutz and Ivanov right now in Western. It's like the alligator closing on the Lviv, but I don't think they're there yet. But I do think they're closing in and ready to make a deal in Kiev. We'll see what happens.
We don't know. The great George Webb, Wuhan Webb, and that's your rap name. And
Okay.
it's Wuhan Webb and Tommy Moisky dropping our new album, Leaving Lviv. And
Leaving Lviv, I love it.
That's our backup plan for eventually, when the CIA comes after this, George and I will be going underground, fleeing to another nation and becoming B-rated, low popularity rappers of Wuhan Webb and Tommy Moisky.
And driving a bat convoy truck on the weekend.
And driving a bat convoy truck. That will be our thing. All of our fans they'll be Batmen and women. It'll be a whole trope. And see, this is important right now, because what we're doing now is by throwing in that last little insane sentence, I'm also setting up George and I's insanity plea, so they can never pin us on anything, because now we are plausibly insane.
I think I made it before then.
I think I made it before I even ever met you. So we're good.
Okay. Very cool. Yep. Well, ladies and gentlemen, I'll put in the kicker here. The great Tommy Carrigan has been discussing a podcast with George Webb. You can find him at Tommy's podcast on Rumble. And you can find me, George Webb, on Twitter at Real George Webb, the numeral 1. And follow us and join us next week for the answer to the test.
Yeah. And I will, as always, all those descriptions will be in the, or my brain's cooked. All those links will be in the description. And George, I will upload this episode ASAP. I will get it up immediately. And yeah, thank you so much, my man. I'll text you.
And you'll send me a link so I can get a copy.
100. Yeah, 100%.
Yeah. So because I want to add graphics and we'll be able to do screenshots next week to remind the audience. Yeah, there you go.
Yeah,
Thanks, Tommy.
You can redistribute, republish, do whatever you want with it. I don't care. Yeah.
Okay.
All right, man.
That sounds great.
God bless
Thanks, Tommy.
everybody.